plasmoids and plasma entities is really popular right now, and this scientist tries to debunk that article. Let's break it down part by part. Let's go.
They're calling them plasmoids. The internet is losing its collective mind over plasmoids, and I thought that this video is a really good chance to talk about the source of it all, which is this paper that was published at the beginning of December 2024. Basically, there's this company called Scripps, I think it is, in Wuhan, China. So my problem is not necessarily with the work not being peer-reviewed. My problem is that it is published in a not peer-reviewed journal, which means that they had no intention of the work being peer-reviewed.
Let me jump in. Peer review is a cancer from outer space. It came from the biomedical community. It invaded science. The old system, because I have to say this because many people who are now professional scientists have an idea that peer review has always been in our literature, and it absolutely motherfucking has not.
Ooh. Let's not forget that we're publishing this stuff on a Chinese-owned app called TikTok, so I don't think that really matters.
So let's look at the authors now, because the person in the video is very excited about the author list and the list of institutions. They are connecting themselves to a place called the Astrobiology Research Center. The person in the video I just showed you got very excited about this. There's no such place in California as the Astrobiology Research Center. This place does not exist.
Yes, it does. It's owned by NASA, and it's the Astrobiology Institute, and it's been in existence for 20 years. It's owned by NASA, and this is a subcomponent and part of that company that operates out of UC Riverside, Alternative Earth's Astrobiology Center. It's actually a real thing.
The other thing is that the person, or the lead author himself, refers to himself as Dr. Joseph, but I cannot find any evidence of what, where, or when this person studied. There is absolutely no credentials anyway to tell us what type of a scientist this person who has written this paper is.
It is Andrew Joe, also at UC Riverside. There is his profile. He is an assistant professor of physics and astronomy. Again, it took me like 5 minutes to find all of this stuff. I'm not sure what search engine you're using.
Now, the second author on the paper is somebody called Olivier Planchon.
Olivier is a French researcher, and he's got his own list right here on his website, and he even references the article. He works at this company, BGS Biogeosciences, and they have a lot of research there. He is listed as one of the researchers for that company, and here is all of their actual publications that you can go look at.
I've tried to look into this person. I cannot find very much information about them.
Took me
I want to skip to Richard
2 minutes to find.
Now, Richard Armstrong is listed as being a member of the Department of Vision Sciences at Aston University in Birmingham. Now, I've looked into this. There is no such place as the Department of Vision Sciences at Aston University.
Yes, there is. It's called the Optometry and Vision Science Research Group. You're just not typing in the search engine properly.
There is no Richard Armstrong currently working at Aston University. I did manage to find a profile for somebody who worked in their Department of Optometry, so that's studying eyes.
How vision affects the plasma of the brain.
The only publication that I found on their research profile information was from 2013.
Again, I found a bunch of information about this guy, R.A. Armstrong. There's the abstract. Here's the articles. And he was involved in optometry and how it actually affects the white matter of the brain and the plasma forms within the brain. So it all still fits.
The next person we're going to go into, which is somebody that the person in the video got very excited about, is Carl Gibson.
Yeah.
Now, Carl Gibson is marked as being at the Center for Astrophysical and Space Sciences at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of San Diego, I believe it is. Now, again, I cannot find any record for anyone by the name of Carl Gibson who works at this institution.
That's because he's retired. Scripps College has an entire department of astronomy. He worked there as a professor. He has his own website, and he's done a ton of work on engineering and physics. And he talks about direction of conductivity, of fluctuation of turbulent flow fields, and all this stuff. He's advanced physics. I mean, turbulent temperatures and its high spatial single. I mean, he has a ton of publications and works. Who cares that he's retired? Who cares that they're retired? What do you plan on doing when you're retired? I would plan on doing all of this cool stuff for sure.
There was a Carl Gibson that taught there approximately approximately 20 years ago. The last reference that I can find for work produced by a Carl Gibson at this institution was from around 2004.
Who cares?
And the last person here, Schild. And this one is a tricky one, because Rudolf Schild is a retired professor. So he's a professor emeritus at the Harvard Smithsonian, which of course sounds very, very, very impressive.
It is.
And it is impressive. He has done quite a lot of work.
Yes. This research institute has massive amount of resources through Harvard, Stanford. So they have all of these telescopes, they've got satellites, they have access to all of this data, and they've been putting out all kinds of publications about their work.
He is a respected scientist who has published in reputable journals.
Then just leave it at that. Why don't you just leave it at that? When you're retired, what do you plan on doing other than exploring your hobbies, right?
It used to be that the editor of a journal took responsibility for the quality of the journal, which is why we had things like Nature crop up in the first place, because they had courageous, knowledgeable, forward-thinking editors. And so I just want to be very clear, because there's a mind virus out there that says peer review is the sine qua non of scientific excellence, yada, 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 bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And if you don't believe me, go back and learn that this is a recent, invasive problem in the sciences. Recent invasive problem that has
This says it all right here.
justification for existing in light of the fact that not only does it
Why
have no
does peer review
justification for
exist?
existing. When Watson and Crick did the double helix, and this is the cleanest example we have, the paper was agreed should not be sent out for review because anyone who was competent would understand immediately what its implications were. There are reasons that great work cannot be peer reviewed. Furthermore, you have entire fields that are existing now with electronic archives that are not peer reviewed. Peer review is not peer review. It sounds like peer review. It is peer injunction. It is the ability for your peers to keep the world from learning about your work.
Good morning, Anna. At long last, we have some scientists who are able to demonstrate good science to prove anomalous phenomena is potentially real. That's the significance of what Dr. Jim Segala tells me on this week's Reality Check.
Plasma orbs, UFOs, drones over New Jersey and buzzing all over the world. What is actually going on? The government and the CIA are holding private meetings, classified meetings about all of this to discuss it. So why are they classifying it all if there's nothing going on? I asked these questions and more to physicist and engineer Dr. Jim Segala, who has been working behind the scenes on this UFO disclosure project. He's been to the Pentagon, he's been to Washington, D.C., he's reported on all of this stuff multiple times, and he's been working heavily on providing solutions and ways that we can actually track the proof of these plasma form entities, UFOs, and drone activities, where they're coming from, where they're going, and actually how they affect you personally.
Yes, and Dr. Jim Segala, he's been featured on the hit show Skinwalker Ranch, which a lot of our viewers are familiar with. What are some of the otherworldly reports he's actually been able to verify with that proof and evidence?
Well, a lot of it is it's very clever. A lot of people were reporting phenomena. And one of the great dilemmas is the debunkers always say, where's the evidence? How do you prove this? And so what Jim conceived was a system where he set up a system of sensors called MUPAS, which are essentially looking for all the kind of different things that might happen during anomalous phenomena. Gamma radiation, electromagnetic radiation, gravitometers, changes in gravity. And he measured those with a sensor that the person who was experiencing this phenomena didn't know what it was recording. And they were writing down in a book at exactly the right time when they were experiencing things like UFOs, when they were having weird poltergeist phenomena in their house. And the incredible thing that Jim has discovered, which I think is potentially very scientifically significant, is that he was able to predict with an incredible accuracy of 4.8 sigma, which is a very high degree of accuracy, when these anomalous events were going to occur, based on what the signals were showing in the sensors that he'd set up.
Here are some highlights from my interview last night. If you want to watch the full video, go check it out on YouTube. You've even been to Washington, D.C. and reported on things in the last few
Yeah,
years.
so I briefed them at the Senate House at the Pentagon. We brief people, and it's interesting when you go to these places and you talk to these high level intelligence people. I mean, all the guys in the Senate, the Senate building are all intelligence people, and they're all, because they're gathering information, they're reporting up to the senators, or doing all these things. And it's interesting to watch the dynamics in the room when you tell them things that you would expect they knew already. They're just looking for verification. You find out, well, they don't really know all these things. So, you question, what does the government really, really know deep down? If you think something's going on, don't think you're crazy, but take action. Don't just let it go.
What do you have to say to everybody that's in the last month or so that's been seeing these large drones flying over? What is your impression as you're watching the news and seeing them come out and talk? Even Trump came out and said that
something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should, because the people are really, I mean, they happen to be over Bedminster. Want to know the truth? They're very close to Bedminster. I think maybe I won't spend the weekend in Bedminster. I've decided to cancel my trip.
There's a ton of people on TikTok right now that are convinced that these drones are trying to look for orbs in plasma, that there's some kind of an uptick in orb activity. And this idea that there's actual living plasma interacting with us in some way, like UFOs, is a huge topic of conversation. I just want to know and give you an opportunity to talk about what's going on in the news and give your opinions.
Well, I think that there's no doubt in our minds now, after all these years, that there is things in the sky that we don't know about, and we don't see them all the time, but they're there. They might not be visible to us, but they're there, making whatever signals there are. So the big question is that are we being affected by these, or are they completely harmless, and they're not affecting our lives, they're not affecting our psyche or our physiology? And I think that's quite wrong. I think that you have to realize that anything you put in our environment is going to affect us. They're out there. We know they're out there. Let's get enough density out there so we can actually monitor this thing. So if it is an orb, we can see it, figure it out, triangulation on it, figure out where it's been, and get more information that way. We would have seen a drone fly from sensor to sensor to sensor, and we would be able to almost pick that thing up and say, this is where it is, this is where it's going, and this is where it came from. So you say, are these things projecting out any kind of information? Are they radioactive? Are they sending out signals? Or is there a large microwave component? And there's nobody, you don't know, because you don't have sensors on the ground measuring and quantifying these things. But we do, unfortunately, with all the devices that I now have out there. There's a bunch in New Hampshire right now that are actually on and looking.
If we had a cluster of those around New Jersey and upstate New York and around all that area, you could literally track these mysterious drones and UFOs as they went across the city. You could tell, oh, it flew from this place to this place to this place, and know where it came from and where it went, the energy it was giving off, and be able to get a good baseline, especially if you line that up with people taking videos and typing in what they saw. We would get a really clear idea that, what's going on.
You could be going along your everyday life, and all of a sudden, maybe you're sitting in your house and a drone flies over that, pumping out serious microwave radiation. It picks it up. It does something to your psyche. It has some effect on your brain physiology. Can't discount all the reports and people's narratives. They say now 70% of the population has had these anomalous experiences. You can't discount that anymore. You can't say, well, they're all crazy. Well, that means everybody's crazy. So you can't, in science, when you have enough data, the law of large numbers says that it has to be true. You can't discount it. So if there is something in the environment that's affecting us, and it's happened all these times, we can't just slough it off and say, we'll let it go.